the game from concept to crowdfunding. I'm your host, Reece. And in this podcast, we talk about the process of making our game, Frontline Gaming. The game is called Blood Throne, and we go from the process of concept, product development, through manufacturing, crowdfunding, fulfillment, and beyond. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Warlock class in depth. The Warlock is one of the expansion heroes. And previously we covered the Paladin and the Dark Knight from the expansion. I also wanted to take the time to say thanks while I was radio silent. I went home back to Idaho to spend some time with my parents. And unfortunately, my mom is going through chemotherapy, so she's very ill. And we wanted to help out with my mom and dad. They're both older, and have them meet our baby before she got too debilitated from the treatment. So thanks for bearing with me while I was radio silent. In regards to the current state of production, we've just been finalizing, like getting the barcodes on the box, the books, and we had to fiddle around with the tokens because some of them didn't fit into the dual layer boards. So we had to go in and adjust them all to make them a little bit smaller so that they either would fit at all or that they wouldn't be really tight in it. But we're done with that as of now. And then the last thing we do before we go into production is I'm going to go through the books one last time, the books and the cards, to try and catch any typos. And that should be done by this weekend. So next week, I'll have an update on our slot for manufacturing and then for fulfillment. But we're there basically. I just want to do one last QC pass to make sure I didn't miss anything. I don't want to rush at the very end and deliver a product where there's something that's obviously wrong. So thanks for that. But like I said, by Monday, any of the last changes that need to be done will be done. And then it will just be a matter of talking to the factory about when we get slotted in for mass production, and then fulfillment after that. Okay, so let's talk about the Warlock. So the Warlock was a really fun and also really challenging class to design for Blood Throne. The Warlock in most RPGs is like a kind of a more of a magic user that makes a pact with some sort of a dark entity, and they kind of like sell their soul, so to speak, for power. And in Blood Throne, it's the same. But the primary difference is that in most other RPG style games like D&D or Pathfinder or whatever, is that they kind of lean more towards a magic user. And you'll have like popular subclasses like the Hexblade or, in Pathfinder, you have a Magus who's somewhat similar, that they're kind of like what I would call like a red mage. Like they're kind of a mix of melee and magic. And for Blood Throne, we leaned more into that archetype because it felt more fitting. We have arcane classes that can do melee, like the Priest is a really good example, or the Shaman is a really good example of that, where the Priest can absolutely, wear medium armor, have a two-handed weapon, and go in and knock heads. So they can be good at melee, but they definitely feel like more of a magic user. The Shaman is the same way. The Shaman in the core box, Bjorn, Carl Bjornsson, has two claws. He hits like an absolute truck. So they kind of like feel like a melee class, but they're definitely more of a magic user. The Warlock is the inverse of that. They definitely feel like a melee class that has magic-like abilities that indicate to you that they have supernatural powers and that they are kind of like a spell blade. Like they're a warrior that's also uses magic. And mechanically, it took me a long time to come up with like how to do it, because I went back and forth, like, should they be an arcane class? Should they be a martial class? And after playtesting it, it felt more appropriate to have it lean into a martial class that has magical abilities. And the way that we did it was, instead of casting spells, like the Paladin, for example, casts spells. They also use shouts, which are like magic-like invocations or commands. The Warlock uses shouts. So mechanically, it makes them really unique. as a quick refresher in Bloodthrone, shouts are spell-like actions, but they almost always use the simple action. So heroes have 2 standard actions, which is move, attack, cast a spell, etc. And then they have 1 simple action, and the simple action is like drinking a potion, or, it's kind of like a half action. Some classes really take advantage of the simple action, and the Warlock is one of them. So the Warlock, because they basically make a pact with a dark power, and in the Bloodthrone universe, that would be a Deva. A Deva is like a demigod. Each faction has a Deva that they worship. Or it could be like a Dival, which is like a diabolic, devil-like entity in the Bloodthrone universe. And then in the lore, we have other sort of more esoteric forces like elemental Devas and even Cthulhu-type outsider, beyonder type entities. And the Warlocks make a pact with one of these entities or a more dark-leaning Deva, and that's where they get their power. So they don't cast spells. That was me really getting into the weeds. I wanted it to feel like they took a shortcut to power, which is kind of the theme of a Warlock. Someone who they sell their soul to gain power immediately instead of practicing for years like a wizard, or, learning for, sword fighting forever like a fighter. They make a deal with the devil, so to speak, and they gain immediate power. So mechanically, the way that is manifested is that they use shout actions, which is like they're invoking their patron to give them power. And mechanically, I felt like it made sense from a thematic point of view. And then mechanically, what it does is it lets the Warlock focus on moving and fighting while also having access to spell-like abilities, the trade-off being, whereas like the Dark Knight or the Paladin, which are also magical warriors, is that they can actually cast spells, although they both do use shouts as well. The Warlock has a bunch of options for their simple action, but they can only do 1 per turn. So it's the way it plays on the tabletop is different. It makes them feel very unique, and they're really, really fun to play. In playtesting, a lot of playtesters found that the Warlock was their favorite character. And actually, the last time that we playtested, when we were giving one last run through the PvP campaign, the Warlock was by far the standout. Like, he had games where he would knock out 3 heroes in one game, which is crazy. That's a lot. So the Warlock is extremely powerful when you get the hang of them. They are a bit of a glass cannon. Their suite of abilities is really focused on dealing damage at range and in melee. And they have some mobility tricks, and they have some abilities to self-buff to make themselves mostly harder to hit. So when it all kind of came out through all the different iterations, what you get is it's a bit of a glass cannon, very mobile. The Warlock is very self-reliant, very efficient. They don't really need help from anybody else, although it certainly doesn't hurt. But the Warlock can basically run around the table by themselves, shooting you at range and then hitting very hard in melee while being hard to hit themselves. So it ends up being a really, really fun hero to play because they're kind of good at everything. They're just not very tanky. Now, the equivalent of the Warlock for the Adherence to Zenith, which, as a quick reminder, the core box gives you 6 heroes from each of the super factions, the Iconoclast and the Adherence to Zenith. And while it's morally complex, the simplistic explanation is the Iconoclasts are the bad guys and the Adherence to Zenith are the good guys. And the hero expansion kind of gives you the rest of the heroes for each faction for the PvP campaign. The Adherence to Zenith equivalent is the Ranger. So they both primarily fill the role of ranged DPS in their party dynamic. So the difference between them is that the Ranger is better at shooting than the Warlock and not quite as good in melee. And then obviously the inverse is that the Warlock is better in melee than the Ranger and not quite as good at shooting, but still very adept at long range. It's just in practice, the Ranger goes into melee less frequently than the Warlock does, and the Warlock is going to be shooting and then setting up a devastating charge. So to that effect, the Warlock has quite a few equipment restrictions. They can only wear up to light armor, and this is to reflect the nature that they're really quick and mobile and nimble. It also kind of fits into the whole archetype of like the Red Mage or the Spellblade, which they're not coming into combat wearing like plate mail armor or anything. Like they rely more on skill and speed. The other big restriction that the Warlock has is that their offhand must equip a fist, meaning you can't have a weapon in their offhand. And the reason for this is that the Warlock's class ability, like their core ability that you always put in your deck, it's called Hellfire Blast. And it's a shooting attack that they use their hand to like shoot out magical blast. So what this means in effect is that they can't use a shield, they can't dual wield, they can't use a two-handed weapon, but they get a free ranged weapon that is one of their class skills. So when you're making a custom Warlock, you don't have to worry about his encumbrance as much. An encumbrance is like your weight limit when you're building a character. It limits how much equipment you can take. So what this means is that you can spread their stats out more than you could with like a Paladin or a Dark Knight or a fighter that needs to put a lot of points into Constitution and Might so that they can carry enough equipment to have a heavy shield, a heavy armor, and a sword or whatever. So the Warlock is in their main hand, cannot take a ranged weapon, and that's because we didn't want them to have like a hand crossbow or a flintlock and then also a shooting attack. Because anytime we found that you had two ranged attacks on one hero, it was too strong. So the Warlock is going to have, a dagger or a sword or a spear or whatever, a one-handed weapon. And what this means is that you're going to very frequently take a level 1 general feat called Duelist Training. And it's really, really good. It gives you +1 accuracy, evasion, and +1 damage to your main hand weapon. So we did this not just for the Warlock. We did it in case you wanted to make a hero like a musketeer or a samurai that just has a katana, or maybe a rogue that only has one dagger. For thematic reasons, you wanted to make a character that just had a one-handed weapon. And we wanted it to be viable mechanically in the game so that you didn't feel stupid if you chose to do that. So it just so happens the Warlock kind of gets pushed into that one. You don't have to take it, but it's a really good choice because it gives you so many buffs to offset the fact that your other hand isn't being used. So what this all means is that the Warlock will frequently only have a single one-handed, or always will have a single one-handed weapon, but they'll be really effective with that weapon, and that helps feed into the fact that they're going to be really effective in melee, more so than the Ranger would be. And the Ranger has to have a two-handed ranged weapon. So that's kind of the difference between the two of them, is they fill the same role in the party, and going forward you'll see this pattern repeated, but the way they do it is different and the way they play is very different. So what you get with the Warlock is a hero that's deadly at every range. They can hit you from, the base range of their Hellfire Blast is medium range, although you can upgrade it to long. And then they're usually very fast. They have the ability to teleport short distances. So they are really good at acting as like a skirmisher or a flanker. They're not really meant to go into the front line and go toe-to-toe, but they can fly around the side and then just sweep through support heroes or monsters really effectively, and that's what they're designed to do. So diving into their class skills, the Warlock's main skill tree is DPS, not surprisingly from the way I've described them. And their class ability is Hellfire Strike, which I already mentioned. It is a medium range ranged attack. And again, it's not a spell that uses accuracy to lean into the fact that the Warlock is more of a fighting class. It does 4 damage plus power, so it's like, it's not extraordinarily powerful, but it's in a line with if you were to take a one-handed ranged weapon, it would have a similar profile, except again, you're not paying any encumbrance, and it doesn't lower your initiative either, which is another benefit. So for example, if you took a flintlock pistol, it would lower your initiative quite a bit to reflect the fact that you're reloading it. And the Warlock is just using an innate ability to do this. So in effect, you have a dual wielding character by default. It has a really strong melee attack and an effective ranged attack. You can further increase the efficacy of Hellfire Strike with 2 different feats. One is reaching Hellfire Strike. Sorry, I've been saying strike, it's blast, my bad. I had to check myself on that. It's Hellfire Blast. Hellfire Strike is another ability, which I'll explain. I'm sorry for the confusion. So reaching Hellfire Blast extends it to long range, which is anything within line of sight. As long as you can see the target, you can shoot it. Although there is a penalty whenever any action is performed beyond medium range. You have disadvantage on it. But it's really rare to have anything that has long range in Bloodthrone. So it's a really good upgrade for being able to zap someone from across the board. And then in addition to this, you can take Empowered Hellfire Blast, which adds 1 red dice to the damage dice pool, which increases the damage significantly. And again, red dice ignore armor and cannot be blocked or parried typically. So it's a solid ranged attack, and it's the core of what makes the Warlock a ranged DPS class. At level 1, you can also get Hellfire Strike. So this is the melee ability that they have, and it's extremely good. And this is what makes the Warlock so versatile. So they have an innate ranged attack, and then they have Hellfire Strike, which is a straight damage buff. So when you use the card, you roll to attack as normal, and if you're successful, you add 2 red dice into the damage dice pool, which is a lot. This is a very powerful attack. And it's like the rogue can do this with backstab, but they have to be striking in the target's rear arc to do it. Now, the trade-off is that a rogue can backstab twice in the same action. So if you're able to get behind someone and hit them twice, you can do it twice, which is really powerful. Hellfire Strike, though, you can just do it when you attack. So typically, what you're going to do is move into position, try to shoot, and then if possible, also charge. And this makes the Warlock just devastating. You do a ton of damage. And ideally, you want to take out a target and then get out of there because he doesn't want to take the counter attack. So you want to try and set it up to KO a target or hurt him enough that someone else can finish them off. Hellfire Strike can be further upgraded with Empowered Hellfire Strike, which adds an additional 1 red dice to the damage dice pool, taking up to 3. This makes it just a really devastating attack. And you'd be rolling normal damage plus 3 red dice. Like the Warlock hits really, really hard. At level 4, the Warlock gains access to an ability called Repelling Blast. This is a really fun, really useful ability. So it's once per game because it is so strong. And it targets every opposing model within reach range of the Warlock, which again, that's every square you're touching plus 1 more orthogonally. And this class skill automatically hits, which is one of the reasons why it's so strong, and it is once per game. It does 2 red dice of damage, and it, more importantly, pushes all opposing models 2 movement points away, which is 2 squares orthogonally or 1 diagonally. And what this means is that it pushes everybody out of engagement range of the Warlock. So you could charge into a group of a bunch of monsters or opposing heroes, hit somebody, Repelling Blast, push everybody away, and then you could teleport out of there with Dimensional Step, which I'll get to. So it's really good when used offensively, like I just described, or if you find that your Warlock is getting ganged up on, you can blast everybody away from you and then run away. At level 8, the Warlock gets an absolutely ridiculous ability. It's called Hellish Portal. Once per game, you target an opposing model within short range, and if successful, they just die. It's really, really fun. It's short range, and of course, if you're playing in PvP, your opponents can do everything possible to stop this. But the lore of it is like the Warlock calls on the dark power that they get their powers from, and they just suck them into the diabolic realm in the celestial plane, right? So thematic and cool, ridiculous, very strong, very fun. When you're playing PvE, you want to use it on like a mini boss monster. The true boss monsters don't get one shot, but still, it's really fun in PvP. It's amazing if you pull it off, and you should laugh evilly as one of your opponent's best heroes is sucked into the hellish plains and is no longer participating in the game. At level 10, the Warlock gets their ultimate skill. Quick reminder, when you hit level 10, you automatically get your ultimate ability. You just put it in your deck. It doesn't count against one of your class skills. This one is really, really fun. It's basically like Goku's Kamehameha. It is a line. That means it has to go orthogonally or diagonally. And you draw a line across the entire board, ignores line of sight, any model, friend, or foe that is in the Eldritch Lance's line gets blasted for 4 red dice plus power. It's really strong. It's really fun to use. And the visual on it is great. The Warlock's secondary skill tree is to be harder to hit, to tank. Although, again, they are not a tank. bear that in mind. At level 1, they get Hexagrammic Ward. And this is a bread and butter ability. You're going to use this all the time. It is a shout action, so it's a simple action. And it gives the Warlock +2 evasion for 1 turn. So this is an ability that you're going to use frequently. And it's like, if you're not using your simple action, you might as well use it because it gives you +2 evasion. The Warlock has base evasion of 3 for their class, which is the highest you can get for base evasion. So even despite the fact they can't take a shield, due to high base evasion, frequently going to be taking duelist training, which increases your evasion, you can make them extremely hard to hit even though they don't have a shield. So you can make an evasion tank, Warlock, if you want to, where you can pump their evasion up to like 10 or more. And when you get that high, people that attack you are going to miss more frequently than they hit. And that's the main way that the Warlock is going to stay alive. You can further upgrade Hexagrammic Ward with a feat, Greater Hexagrammic Ward, that additionally grants you the Braced Inspiration. And what Braced does, it means you have no rear arc when you are not the active model. So that means someone can't hit you in the back arc. And why that is so good is that when you're hit in the back arc, they gain advantage, which increases their odds of hitting and critting. And it also means you can't parry, dodge, resist. You can't take any reactive action. So not having a rear arc is really, really strong. So just generally a great class skill, one you're going to be taking more frequently than you do not. At level 2, the Warlock can choose Devilish Parry. This is a reactive action, meaning it's a free action. You use it in another character's activation, and it gives you a free parry. So the reason that this is so good is because the Warlock doesn't really have any defensive capability. And normally when you parry, you gain the disarm status on the weapon that you parry with. So what that means is that you can't attack with it in the next activation. So the Warlock is really sort of defenseless. If you hit the Warlock, there's not much they can do. But this card gives you the ability to reduce the damage of a single attack once per activation, which is quite good. And then at level 3, you can take a general feat called Improved Parry, which lets you parry without gaining the disarm status, which is really good. However, if you don't want to burn one of your feats for that, you can take this card and just use it when you need it. And then at level 3, there's other general feats you may want to take. So it's just a good utility card to put in your deck if you have an extra skill choice that can help keep the Warlock alive for an extra turn. At level 6, the Warlock can take a class skill called Steel Vitality. It's kind of a twist on the self-heal. And what this does, and it's fitting to the theme of the Warlock, since they're typically selfish, probably evil characters. They care about their own power and they're willing to do whatever they can to take it. You automatically deal 2 raw dice of damage to an ally, to a friend, and then you heal double the amount rolled for yourself. So hurting a buddy is never fun, but essentially being 4 red dice of healing is actually really good. It's considerably better than most other martial classes self-heal options. And if you're doing it on a class like the Dark Knight, where they could gain a paint token as a result of it. And typically they have a ton of HP, so losing like an average of 4 HP isn't really that big of a deal. You could give them a paint token and then heal yourself 8. It can be a lot of fun to do it. And we felt like it was thematic. It's kind of cool. The Warlock is just kind of a dick. So we thought it was a cool ability to add in, and it ends up being a very effective heal. I mean, you could do it on a summon as well. You know, someone that you don't, if they get knocked out, it's not the end of the world. To keep the Warlock in the fight for another turn. And then finally, the tertiary skill set for the Warlock is mobility. They only have one skill, but it is a banger. It's called Dimensional Step. It is a short-range teleport. So why this is so good is, again, it's a simple action. So it's a shout. So the Warlock can move to any square within short range, which is roughly 4 squares. But it ignores intervening models and terrain and attacks of opportunity. So this is really good to get the heck out of dodge, to move through like a wall or a building and attack from an angle that your opponent doesn't see coming. It's really good. And the fact that it's a simple action means that you could teleport, shoot, and then charge, or shoot, charge, teleport away. It makes this is a card you're going to put in your deck every single time you play. And it's one of the core reasons why the Warlock is so fun, because they're just like flying all over the place, stepping through, summoning a portal, stepping through it, appearing somewhere else, not getting a free attack on them. It's really, really good. And then you can upgrade this further with a feat to have +1 square range. So then now you're talking about a potential 5 square move, which is a lot, especially if you want to make a Warlock that's like a dwarf or something that has slower base speed. And it's super duper fun to use. It's kind of similar to the rogue that has dash that does something similar. When you play with the Warlock and the rogue at the same time, although they're very squishy, the mobility that you have is insane. So for a high skill player, you can do some really crazy stuff with the two of them. For feats, the Warlock has 2 tracks, and that's hitting harder and being harder to hit. So they're fairly straightforward, which is pretty common with martial characters, but they're very good. So at level 2, the Warlock has two very simple but very good choices. They can either increase their accuracy by +1 or evasion by +1. So really straightforward. Do you want to hit more often or be harder to hit? So if you're building an evasion tank Warlock, obviously the evasion is going to be really effective. And if you just want to hit more frequently and crit more often, go for the accuracy. At level 4, the Warlock can either take Reaching Hellfire Blast or Greater Hexagramic Ward. Reaching Hellfire Blast increases the range to long range, which is line of sight. It's very good. And Greater Hexagramic Ward gives you Braced on top of the +2 evasion for that skill. So again, it depends on the way you want to play. If you want to play a more ranged Warlock that kind of floats around sniping, then Reaching Hellfire Blast is going to be the better choice. Greater Hexagramic Ward is going to be better for a Warlock that is getting into melee more frequently. At level 6, the Warlock can take Empowered Hellfire Blast, which gives you +1 red dice to your ranged attack. Or they can take Cloak of Shadows, which is a passive ability that whenever they make a defend action, they also gain the hidden status. So these are both really good for a shooting Warlock. Obviously, increasing the damage doesn't really require any explanation. But being able to shoot, maybe teleport out, shoot, and then defend and also gain hidden is really good. It's really annoying because it means that your Warlock can shoot and then not be shot back. Because when you're hidden, you're invisible. You can't be targeted outside of short range. So if you want a sniper Warlock, this is a really good option and it'd make it really annoying. Alternatively, you could just do more damage with your shooting attack. So both really good choices, both depend on how you want to play. And then also being able to go hidden, maybe you pick up an objective and now you've got the hot potato and you know everyone's going to be gunning for you. Or if you can then defend and then go invisible, also really, really good. And finally, at level 8, you can take Empowered Hellfire Strike, which increases the damage of your primary melee attack to +3 red, which is extremely strong. Or you can take Reaching Dimensional Step, which gives you +1 square on your teleport, which is deceptively good because it's a radius around the character. The number of squares, the number of additional squares that you can then touch is the function of the circumference of a circle. So it's actually a lot more effective than it may sound at first blush when you're talking about just +1 square. So it's basically a 5 square radius around the character, which is a huge chunk of the board. So they're both very good options, and it depends, again, just on how you want to play your Warlock. Do you just want to munch people in combat, or do you want to have more mobility options available to you, depending on what you want to accomplish? So playing Dextrioth, the character in the hero expansion, he is a lot of fun to play, and writing the character was super fun. We went kind of crazy with his lore. It was just a really fun character to write because, when you're trying to create backstories for lots of heroes to bring the setting to life, some of them just kind of write themselves, and a character that sells their soul to a Dark Lord, Akrathil, it's pretty easy to kind of like run with it and come up with some cool ideas. So Dextrioth, the Blood Burned of Tathrax, which there's an explanation for his long name. It's pretty cool. He was born one of a pair of twins. He is an infernal elf, which in Bloodthorn is basically like a tiefling elf, or like an elf with demonic aesthetic to them. They're known in the world of Bloodthorn for being kind of like darkly alluring, as well as very aggressive, having an aggressive and passionate demeanor. They burn hot. And they're not inherently evil or anything. They just tend towards aligning themselves with factions that favor their disposition of being action-oriented and aggressive. So he was born one of twins, and in the custom of where he was born, one twin was sent to the Temple of Zenith. He was sent to the Temple of Hasathan, and he was raised in basically the Church of Destruction. He was very good at his job, a little too good. He got a little arrogant. And during the Throne Wars and the subsequent Blood Crusade and the lore, he decided to take the Blood Sacrament, which is like taking a bunch of Devathan. And unfortunately, he was unable to handle it, and it mutated him into a rampager, like a monster, essentially. So he was condemned to a fate of madness and unending pain until he died. Not great. And Inquisitor Calth found him and basically saved him. Kind of brought him back to sanity, and he then formed a Warlock pact with Lord Akrathil himself, which returned him back to sanity and reverted some of the horrible mutations and such that he had been experiencing. So as a result of this, he is unquestioningly loyal to both Lord Akrathil and Lord Akrathil and Inquisitor Calth. So he serves as kind of their like muscle in the lore. He's an enforcer, an assassin. He's feared by everybody. He's kind of the quiet guy in the back that when things go sideways, he's the one that goes and does the dirty work. So really cool character. He's intimidating. He has a reputation. He's feared. And on the tabletop, he's super duper fun to play. So he's an elf, so he has movement 6, which makes him extremely mobile, which, on top of his ability to teleport. He also has a spear, which when you build a Warlock is pretty common because it has reach range. So it makes his total threat range enormous, right? So spears normally only do 3 damage dice, but because of the duelist training feat, it does 4. Has the accurate keyword, he's accuracy 4, so he rarely misses, and he can hit you from downtown. Makes him really, really versatile, right? With his ranged attack, high speed, and reach range on his weapon, plus the ability to hit really hard with Hellfire Strike, 2 power. He's very deadly. Now, the flip side is that he only has light armor and 15 HP, so he's not super durable. He does have evasion 6, which is quite high. And then if he puts hexagrammic ward on himself, he goes to evasion 8, which is really hard to hit. So, in total, he's a character that's extremely mobile, can shoot, can punch, decently durable. You know, he's no tank at all. But if you play him correctly, he's just an absolute terror. He's going to be doing tons of damage and flying all over the board, which is really fun. On top of his really solid stats, you know, he also has 4 class skills, which is really high for a martial character. Typically, they have like 2 or 3. So he's not going to feel like he doesn't have options when he's trying to pick which cards to put in his deck. So he's really well-rounded. Again, like the only downside is that he's only armor 1 with 15 HP. So he's, you know, 2 hits frequently, 2 solid hits, and he's going to be out. So you just want to be careful in how you play him. In playtesting, people that didn't like the Warlock would just charge in with him and he would get knocked out. And that's true of all of the finesse melee characters like the Rogue, the Monk, the Warlock. They all fall into that category of being kind of a skill like a high skill level class. But if you're patient and set up a good angle of attack, they're devastating. All 3 of those classes function like that. As an Infernal Elf, Dextrioth has the Infernal Flames heritage skill. All heritage skills are once per game, and they kind of like give flavor to the individual heritages to inform like why you would pick one. Like why would you pick an Infernal Elf over an Ancestral Elf, for example? So Infernal Flames, once per game, and if it successfully hits its target within short range, it sets them on fire, which we felt was cool and thematic. And it's a DOT that will do 3 red dice over time. So it's really useful to finish off a character that you didn't quite take out when you attack, or just to like put it on a tank character to help chip away at their HP. So really fun and thematic ability. And it's kind of similar actually to the Sea Elf down in the Dashing the Rogue, who has a similar one where he can poison you from short range. So Dextrioth is built for speed, hitting hard, and he is hard to hit. So as you're leveling him up, you may want to lean more into the being hard to hit aspect, or you might want to just go all in on just KOing people when you attack them. So for upgrades, you want to focus on items that are going to increase what Dextrioth is already good at. So giving him +1 movement to take him to movement 7 is a common upgrade, and it's insane. It makes him so fast, it's stupid. Really, really good. And again, that's why you might take Devilish Parry, the class skill, instead of Improved Parry, because if you take Improved Parry, you can't take the extra movement. And then anything that can help his evasion, too, is really good. There's like magical rings and stuff that can give you passive evasion buffs, or enchantments that you can put on his spear to increase the damage. Those are all things that you're going to want to focus on with Dextrioth, is to just keep making him better at what he already does. Speed, hitting hard, and from range and in melee. When you're playing against Dextrioth, it can be a bit intimidating because he is so fast and hard to pin down. He can jump out of combat, jump through walls, shoot you, punch you. Just remember that he is squishy. And like one of the best counters against him is the Ranger. Grey Wolf, you'll hear me say that a lot. Grey Wolf is a really good counter to everybody because he's like a sniper. And then a really good pet, like the wolf pet, again from the Ranger, is good against him because the wolf has movement 6. He's very quick and he has reach. And the wolf hits really hard. Not super accurate. I mean, as a pet goes, he's the most accurate pet as pets go. But at the very least, it forces the Warlock to run away from the wolf or spend turns dealing with it. So that's a good way to counter it. Anything at range. And then if you can cast blind on the Warlock to make his accuracy 0, it just takes all of his teeth, takes the teeth out of all of his attacks. And then slowing him down with like pen or hobbled. Really, really effective because a heavy hitter like the Paladin can kill the Warlock in 1 round of combat. Or like the Druid unleashing a full salvo of offensive spells can do it too. So don't have a plan to deal with it. Understand that he's going to be faster than you, and just try to set up a way to counter him when he comes in, or again send a distraction unit after him to force him to deal with it. So, he has a glass cannon, can be intimidating. If he goes hot, he can kill half your party before you realize it. But it only takes 1 or 2 good hits and then you can pop him. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Warlock. Again, next week I'll have an update on fulfillment, so be excited for that. The game looks absolutely spectacular. I was really, really happy with it. We just had to get all the tokens to fit in the boards, annoyingly. But since the whole game organizational function when you're playing the game revolves on the tokens going in the boards, we had to like really dial it in, and we ended up shrinking the diameter by 1.5 millimeters to ensure that they fit not snugly in, and that just took some time to redo all that stuff, but we are done with it now. Next week, we're going to be going on to the Monk, which is my personal favorite. I watched too much Dragon Ball or something as a kid, I don't know, but in RPGs, I always gravitate towards playing a Monk. I just love it. I just love the idea of a guy that does a lot of push-ups and then goes and thinks he can punch a dragon in the face. And so we'll do that next, and that'll be the last martial character before we move on to the skill classes.